because I don't differentiate between Ukrainians who live in the east and in the west. We're all brothers. We are all Ukrainians, and when brothers are killing brothers, that is not normal. When peaceful cities are being bombed, it's not normal. When separatists are shooting from peaceful cities and put their rocket launchers in peaceful cities, that is also not normal. What happened is reality was replaced. They talk about Russian army because it's easier to kill Russians than to kill your own countrymen, your own brothers. But when my people work there, when they see those, former miners, former teachers, we can disagree with them. I disagree with them. I don't support separatism. I think Ukraine should be one country. But let's not pretend that they are not Ukrainians. They are Ukrainians. Ukrainians are killing Ukrainians. And all these fakes, all this propaganda, all this warmongering, they're fanning the flames of conflict. All these stories of, somebody being buried alive, castrated, all these fakes. I've always been against it and I will continue being against it, and nobody can shut me up. So to put things in our local context, what do you think about, the Western media also doing this sometimes, manipulating facts? Because making fakes is contagious, that's what I'll say. For me, Western journalism was always a standard to strive for. And it's not something I've heard about. I have personally talked to French journalists, to German journalists, and every time they would take an interview from me, they would turn me inside out. They don't just take you on your word, but they actually ask you, can you verify this? Can you show me the proof? It's like an actual interrogation. And then these mass media suddenly start copying the gibberish produced by Ukrainian mass media. Why did this happen? One key point for me was Ukrainian President Petro Poroshenko's announcement of a destroyed Russian armored column in front of serious European politicians. And then I understood that European mass media just cannot imagine a president of a country just coming out and lying to their face. There never was any armored column. Nobody has ever seen it. No coordinates were ever given. So they have started using fakes from the Ukrainian mass media, and it's easy, here's the source, and if whatever they said is true, is not our problem. And it's dangerous, it blurs the concept of journalism, and it's like cancer, a tumor spreads metastasis, and tomorrow German mass media will be publishing gibberish like our Ukrainian ones. I do not like when somebody tries to brainwash me. I think of myself as a intelligent man, and back in 2004, for example, I wasn't for Yushchenko, I was against Yanukovych, because on every TV station, every newspaper, I would see his smiling mug, and this disgusts any normal person. A lot of people tell me this, a lot of my subscribers. By the way, I have subscribers from a lot of countries. US is actually third after Russia and Ukraine, and people are looking for an alternative point of view. They are tired of this official propaganda, and of course Russia pushes it too. But Russia, recently I saw some Russian news. I was staying in a hotel, and Russia 24 was available there. So for 3 days I watched Russia 24. Yes, it's propaganda, but it's done so well, you can't compare it to Ukrainian. If you switch on like TSN, it's propaganda for somebody who didn't go to high school. And the Russia 24 it's such professionally done propaganda. I see it, everything is so measured, nothing is accidental. There's none of these fakes, none of this gibberish, none of these repetitive depressing songs, all these funerals, somebody getting buried every day at the Maidan. What kind of normal person would want to watch that? So how can a normal person who doesn't have a whole lot of time recognize fakes, propaganda? Are there any special signs? So can you help us with that question? Yes, Yes, of course. So, first off, if the journalists start using biased definitions from both sides, like terrorist troops, what was there like a court decision that these people are terrorists? And if there are terrorists, what acts of terror did they commit? A journalist should not use such language. Or journalists talking about, Nazi, Bandera, junta. In that case, we're clearly dealing with propaganda. People are trying to decide for you what to call something, what to think about it. As far as fakes go, recently fakes have been so dumb, so, idiotic that, they're obvious and you can easily see that this is something outrageous, something outreal. And if you see that, then you can take, a few minutes, just go and check the source, see where this originates from. And 90% of the time there will be no source. It will say, according to eyewitnesses, by the testimony of our informant, you can be 98.9% sure this is fake. If they say that foreign newspaper so and so said this, then you can go backtrack along various sources to the first source and find out what they actually said. There's always Google Translate, you can always find out what actually happened. And it brings satisfaction, you feel that you are not some idiot who's sitting in front of a TV and mindlessly swallowing everything they feed you. I know what you're saying when you say that a regular person doesn't have the time to filter everything, but unfortunately that's how it is. You can't just believe everything. Back in the Soviet times, people just thought that, it's in the newspaper, it must be true. But unfortunately those times are past. You can't just believe everything you hear in the media, especially in Ukrainian media. Everything in there needs to be double checked and triple checked. And I'm less interested in Russian mass media, and people keep asking me, why aren't you talking about Russian mass media? Why should I talk about Russian mass media? I'm Ukrainian. Ukraine is my home. You first need to clean up your house and then look at the neighbors. I don't care what happens with the neighbors, even if they all die from the filth. That's it. Thank you. Then I'd like to transition to our second block, which talks about the current events in Ukraine. Currently, there is a shaky truce already established for almost a month. So the sides are blaming each other, but both sides recognize that, most artillery has been pulled back. So I would like to ask you, what do you think is going to happen in the next 5-10 years? Will it be like another Transnistria or something else? As far back as the revolution, the winter of 2013, I was writing that the opposition is actually helping Russia's plans, Putin's plans. And they didn't believe me back then, and I was writing that unless you act, unless you shut up the radicals, then Crimea will leave. The people are frightened, and they will leave. And that would be it. There would be no way back. But when I was saying this in talk shows and interviews, people would shut me up and tell me, this won't happen, we'll just beat them all, NATO will protect us, the Crimea will never dare to leave. So back then I believed something could be done. In the summer I believed something could be done. Even after May 2nd, I believed something could be done. Although May 2nd was a breaking point. It was something unimaginable. That massacre, I never imagined something like that could happen in my country. Like the revolution, like the 100 killed. Back then I believed it, and even now I still believe it, I think. At least I still think that Ukraine can remain a unified country. Not a shattered country, and if not a shattered country, not a cheap woman who just rushes from one client to another, and if one daddy leaves her, she immediately has to run to another. Are we such a small country? Do we not have enough population? Don't have enough resources? Don't have enough... So I believe Ukraine can be strong, but not with a government like this. And the government, each new government, is worse than the previous one. The people in power in Ukraine now are not politicians. politician. They are not economic experts. They are just people from the street. And they're not just committing mistakes, they are committing crimes. And with a government like this, and I don't think in the next 5, 10 years people will get so much smarter than they will get a government that's radically different. I don't think Ukraine can go anywhere. So in Ukraine's future, I see this black tunnel with no light in it. Unfortunately, that's my opinion. So I would ask this question then. So Ukraine is Europe. Do you agree? What does this mean? I don't quite get it. What does Europe mean? If we take each Ukrainian and give him an ID that says, you are a European, will people stop pissing in elevators and bushes? Will people stop throwing cigarette butts everywhere? Maybe they will stop swearing in the streets so loudly. Maybe all the trash will go away, the roads will get fixed. Maybe people will stop stealing. Maybe people will become polite, like in Europe. I don't understand what it means. Ukraine is Europe. We can consider ourselves whatever we could have become a country that Europe would invite. We wouldn't have to run everywhere and beg for various things, but they would just say, guys, you are so awesome, come join us. I'm sure this could have happened, but Europe doesn't start with passports or anything else. It starts right here in the brain. So if people are thinking like they're still in the Soviet Union and at the same time they're throwing down Lenin monuments and building Stalinism, taking the country back to 1937, there are all these murky court cases. People are getting put to prison for writing a few words. You know, this guy wrote Novorossiya, okay, whatever, he's a fool maybe, but you can't put somebody to prison for 5 years for that. That is his opinion. He's not inciting people to kill somebody, to explode something. Okay, he wrote something, he made a leaflet. When a kid distributes leaflets that pensions are no longer enough to pay for the new utility prices, you cannot put him to prison for that. You are acting like Stalinists. You are recreating Stalin's heritage from the 30s. You are recreating the Red Terror. You are one step away from Stalin's tribunals. Actually, the new courts, the ones that put journalist Katsaba to jail and such, they are pretty much like Stalin's tribunals. Same deal. And to say we're Europe, I'll say I have not seen something like that in Europe. When I was arrested by Interpol in the Netherlands on the Ukrainian government's request, Lithuania said, let Netherlands decide. So the Netherlands could have just given me up and be like, good riddance. But no, I've seen an actual court. And the judge in front of me was going on the internet, looking things up, and 5 days later I got a paper signed by the Attorney General. That is real justice. That I get. And what happens in Ukraine, I've been to those courts, I've been through them myself, and what happens now is not any better. In fact, it's actually worse. So to say that Ukraine is Europe, well, we can say it, but it won't change the facts. So coming back to the Orange Revolution in 2004, and you were against Yanukovych until 2012, so I assume you didn't start loving him more since then. So here's the question. You probably don't regret him being overthrown, so do you think it was a good thing that he was basically kicked out by force? Do you think that the Maidan revolution was a good thing, or did something just go wrong? At the very beginning, actually, I came to the Vilnius summit and I was even among the crowd that was standing there and shouting, Yanukovych signed the Euro Association, etc. So I wasn't opposed to it, but I knew from the very beginning that signing Euro Association does not have anything to do with joining the EU. I kept explaining, but people would tell me you're wrong, you're wrong. So I actually even wanted them to sign the Euro Association so they would see if their salaries would increase after signing it and what will happen once the borders are open and local industry will not be able to take the competition. So I was even interested to see it. And the same thing for Russia's customs union, by the way. I'm categorically opposed to joining that. In my opinion, Ukraine has to make its own way, not be subordinate to one or another master. I don't support Yanukovych. I don't just not support him. Yanukovych and his men took everything from me. They took my family, my country, my job that I loved. They left me with nothing at all. I remember all the crap they wrote. I have all the court documents saved. And my lawyers were fighting them for 9 months. And when people say that I left without fighting, no, I fought them to the last possible moment. I did everything possible within Ukraine legal system and submitted all the appeals. And Yanukovych's men ignored everything that I did. By the way, all of them are wanted now. They have run away. So, do I have any good feelings for them? Of course not. None at all. And the same for Yanukovych himself. I always knew that he will end up, if not like this, then something like this. But his team had professionals, real economists. I'm not talking about police and legal system, that's separate. But the economic part of his administration were real professionals. To hold the course of hryvnia stable for so long, after Yulia Tymoshenko, that takes talent. We were told they're using up the hard currency reserves. Now, the government is using up the hard currency reserves. Back then, those guys hold it stable because the economy was stable. So, overall, I was okay with the revolution up until the murders at the Maidan started. When the first murder happened, Serezha Nikoyan, nobody talks about it now, but he was killed with a shotgun, point blank, with buckshot. What he was made into an involuntary martyr, and people talked about police snipers. What kind of snipers use buckshot if it spreads like that even at 10 yards? So when the murders started, I realized something is wrong. And when the horrible bloodshed started, when 100 people got killed, so-called heavenly 100, then I understood everything. When I started killing kids, those conscripted police troops guys, when I saw that video where the kid is trying to run away and the protesters are chasing him down and finishing him off, that police troops kid, the Berkut troops with eyes missing, the protesters being shot by unknown snipers, how could I support this? It's Ukrainians killing Ukrainians. Total massacre and mayhem. What do you call this? A European transfer of power? And, you know, to me it was absolutely clear. Who is shooting these guys in the back and why? That is my opinion, and I have always voiced it. Because Yanukovych is a coward. He always avoided the bloodshed and he ran away as soon as it started. Can you imagine this? Why would he order his troops to shoot and then run away right after that happened? This makes no sense whatsoever. So, how can I support what happened at the Maidan? No, I don't support it at all, and this is my opinion. Thank you. And one more question. As you have probably seen on the news, Putin has recently talked about what actually happened in Crimea, and I know your position that, you know, Crimea is part of Ukraine, it should not be part of Russia, and I suppose you don't support Russia's support of the separatists, that, you know, volunteers come in for a virtually open border, and that their mass media is supporting, you know, and that they are providing equipment and even probably heavy armor. So, in view of that, what is your attitude towards Russia and towards Putin himself? Well, that's a hard question to answer. Well, about the vehicles and all that, I was actually one of the first to show how these vehicles are supplied, through which city. So it's stupid to deny that Russia is arming them. Crimea, I consider it part of Ukraine, although Crimeans write to me and say that, you know, we don't think so, don't decide for us. Well, I'm not deciding for them. This is just my opinion, I'm not forcing it on anybody. But I think Crimea should be Ukraine, and I think one day Crimea will return to a free, rich, prosperous Ukraine that has a working legal system and is economically independent. About Russia, Well, Russia is a great country. I'm not sure why I should deny this. Russia is a powerful, big, great country. This is the first time I'm saying something like this about Russia. Yes, it's a great country, but for me, Netherlands are also a great country. Another thing is my attitude towards Putin. How can you have a simple attitude towards, say, Stalin, for example? About Stalin, I can repeat the words of Churchill, who said he's a genius politician. But at the same time, we cannot deny that he was an evil genius as well. Putin certainly tries to do something good for his empire, and he certainly has an empire building mindset. He's thinking like an emperor and trying to strengthen and expand his empire. But to call him a maniac, a psycho, like a lot of mass media are writing, well, that means 86% of Russians support a maniac, and this means that they are probably maniacs themselves, which doesn't really make sense. So, attitude towards Putin cannot be very simple. I am completely okay with Russia. I do not dislike Russians themselves. The volunteers are another matter. Also in the pro-government battalions, you know, Swedes come, Chechens come to come shoot Ukrainians in the war in the east. And I don't like people coming to the other side either. Yes, I understand that without their backing, the war would be over quicker. But at the same time, I think this is a civil war. This is an internal Ukrainian matter, and we need to resolve it. I understand a lot of people might disapprove of this, but this is what I think. So, there's that. Thank you. And finally, a philosophical question. When will people quiet down and finally make peace? I think it won't happen soon, unfortunately. I think this will last years. This blood feud that has been started and is continually fueled with more bloodshed, I think it is here to stay, unfortunately, and it will take a while for this mutual hatred to die down. You know, when people in Kiev see a car with Russian tags and they paint it with some slogans, what if a man came to Kiev to build a restaurant or something? You know, there are plenty of people who don't care at all about politics. Maybe he came here to build a shish kebab restaurant, and you paint his car or break his windows, so he leaves and you're sitting there without shish kebab. So, this will last a while, it's here to stay. This hysteria is not dying down, it's actually being fanned because the government benefits from this. Because if everybody understands that an official in Kiev taking bribes is not Putin's fault, then people will start asking questions. If people understand that the economic collapse is not just because of Donbass leaving, and by the way, Donbass were always called moochers, so people will start asking questions as well, so a scapegoat is needed, something to distract the people. Not only Ukraine does this, there are a few other countries that do the same thing. To distract the populace from internal problems, always pointing to an external enemy. If not for Putin, they would point to Churutin or aliens from outer space, new AIDS, new Ebola, anything. Basically, it's always needed to shift the focus from huge internal problems to external ones. Now, the very last question. What can you tell our viewers, our readers? Because the Russians here in Estonia have sort of split into two camps, and one side says, you know, Poroshenko should stop killing women and children in Donbass, and the other side says that, you know, Putin is the villain here. I would say that truth is always somewhere in the middle, and you can't paint one side all white or all black. And for me personally, it was very pleasing to read the comments under all the slanderous pieces that were published about me on Lithuanian websites. I was reading the comments of real Lithuanians writing in Lithuanian language, and I was very pleased to see them say, you know, I hate Putin, But Sharii is saying the truth, so we cannot fault him for that. So you understand? So we should just look for the truth, avoid the extremes, and don't believe everything you see in the mass media. Not all of it is true. Sometimes even what they tell you is the opposite of the truth. So you need to search for the truth. Don't just believe in something blindly, but try to understand things by yourself. Avoid becoming a zombie, avoid becoming a part of a crowd, following the herd. It's hard to go against the flow, but that's the only way.